Welcome everyone, and please join us. I think Blanca wanted to say a few words. We are so happy to be here at ZKM, and so far it has been a wonderful experience. Blanca, did you want to come and say a few words? Just a few words. Thank you. This is Blanca Jimenez, who is co-curator of this incredible exhibition. I hope you have been enjoying it so far. And we're about to create some more things for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to welcome everybody to the show, to Open Codes, to the even to Music Tech Fest Labs. That would be a 24-hour intervention. Actually, it would be 25 hours because we have a switch at 3. But I just wanted to welcome everybody and say ZKM is also really happy to have the possibility to host this event. And then I will pass the word to Michela Magas. This is the foundation from Music Tech Fest and would explain a little bit what we are living today until Sunday at 6 p.m.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Blanca. As I say, again, super happy to be here. You may spot a few people around the room who are wearing kind of t-shirts with some names on. For those of you who are familiar with computing and electronics and electronic music, you may actually recognize or guess who these names belong to. If you are not familiar or this is new to you, and I will try and speak slowly so you can translate. The first name here, it belongs to Ada Lovelace. She was a woman who was familiar with weaving techniques long time ago during the sort of beginnings of industry. And she was the person who was the first to suggest how to do programming. Because programming languages at first were informed by weaving techniques. Weaving textiles had to be programmed, and a woman was the one who thought about how you program machines as a result. She worked with Charles Babbage, who created the first computing machine. The other three women on here are Delia Derbyshire, Laurie Spiegel, and Daphne Oram, and all three of them were involved with something called the Radiophonic Workshop, and they were very early women in electronic music, and they used computing to create music and to create completely new types of sound and to invent completely new kinds of electronics for it. So we have some women who are not celebrated usually in this domain. We are always very happy to celebrate them and promote them, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. Behind me, this person behind me, maybe some of you will know who this is. This is the European Commissioner Carlos Moedas, who is in charge of innovation and research and innovation for the European Commission, so he's Juncker's cabinet. The reason why he is on the screen is because the hands that are holding a device to his head are in this room. Chico, would you stand up, please? This is Francisco Teixeira. He's a neuroscientist from Portugal. He's here with his team called MuArts. Horacio Marquez is sitting over there, and Luis Años, who's sitting over there. They are part of the MTF Labs today. They are the neuroscientist team who are combining neuroscience and the arts. And in this case, we were invited to Gatecrash as MTF Labs, as Music Tech Fest and Music Tech Fest Labs, the European Commission, during a very important event. This was a conference which had 700 VIPs in the room, including Nobel laureates and politicians, deciding about the future of European research and innovation. And we were invited to basically intervene with this space. And in this case, the MuArts team set up a neurofeedback reader to read Carlos Moedas's signal from his brain and then visualize and sonify it for the benefit of the audience of these 700 VIPs, and then 3,000 people online. It was live streamed during question time. So this was rather interesting, and he was very courageous to do this. And he did rather well. Now, as a result of working with this wonderful community, and you are seeing a very small selection of some of the most wonderful people in our community. Our community counts currently over 7,400 experts and practitioners from all kinds of areas of activity. A huge amount of them are artists, huge amount of them are programmers, developers, hackers, a lot of scientists, as you see. I've just introduced a neuroscientist team here. We even have politicians amongst our ranks. We have a huge academic community, PhDs, postgraduates, really incredible community. And what's wonderful about it is that we are united by music as the center of everybody's experimentation. We call music our social glue. And what's wonderful about music is it seems to break down barriers of communication between people from different disciplines. So while we usually have a problem with talking to each other about our knowledge, where we have a problem, for instance, with having to, like if someone is an expert in a particular field of study, it's very difficult for them to explain what they know to someone from a different field. We find that by interacting through music and in this environment where everybody comes together on a level plane, we are able to break down those barriers and the knowledge exchange becomes really, really fast. For many reasons, because we have this fantastic big community, and when our community, for instance, involved more than 500 people creating things in Berlin 2 years ago, I decided that what we needed was a role model that would represent this community, music tech community. And I don't know if you can see her on the right. This is Victoria Modesta. I decided that we needed a champion of our community. In this case, what happened was we were noticed as a community by President Obama in the last month of his presidency. He was guest editing the edition of Wired magazine in the US. And we were very lucky. We had no idea this was going to happen. We were listed as one of the future technology frontiers and also represented by this role model, Victoria Modesta. Why did I choose Victoria as our role model and our representative in this case? Victoria is someone who is completely at the cutting edge of where we can go as human beings. She was born with the problem with the leg that was severely deformed, and she made, after several attempts to save this leg to become functional, decided to do something quite radical and actually substitute it by something else that was at first a statement piece and something that wasn't necessarily functional in the traditional sense, but then later on this same limb became a tool which we turned as a community of developers and artists into something that could do other functions. Now, Victoria is like a Lady Gaga of the accessibility world. She's a pop star, a performer, an actress. She's currently in a sci-fi drama in the US. She closed the Paralympics in London. She opened the Paralympics in Rio. She's a real personality, and she's now MIT Media Lab Fellow as well, Director's Fellow. In this particular case, a wonderful fashion tech designer, Anouk Wipprecht, developed her leg as something that would create smoke for the stage, driven by sensors. So it was one of the means with which Victoria could express herself on the stage. So this leg was actually a device. And of course, she was completely covered in devices. We covered her in sensors and in all kinds of new applications and a carbon fiber outfit. And then, of course, the wonderful thing was the neurofeedback story. So the MuArts team fitted her with neurofeedback sensors that allowed her to train her brain to change the color of her outfit. And this was based on clinical trials where neurofeedback is used to visualize brain activity. And for people who have anxiety attacks, for instance, they can visualize when the brain pattern changes and they can start to train to control it. Now, what's wonderful about this is that our brain is incredibly plastic, and it will really very quickly train to start to manipulate systems. And using this kind of system, Victoria trained during our labs in Berlin, which lasted for 5 days. She was able to then consciously change the color of her outfit as one of the forms of expression while she was performing. You will see here How many women are involved in our labs? We have easily 50% women in the technology platform, but that's because it's creativity driven. And we find that this is, creates a completely different atmosphere for people who collaborate together. So you will see also amongst our participants here, we always have a really good portion of female scientists and artists and specialists in all kinds of fields. We continued this story of MTF Labs, another week-long lab in conjunction with Slush, the biggest convention of startups in Europe. And when they asked us, what would you like to do? Because I opened Slush Music on the first day it was launched, first year it was launched, and they said, would you like to come back and do something next year? And I said, we'll do a lab. We'll do a 5-day lab, but instead of doing the startup pitch, which is what people usually do at Slush, which is a 3-minute pitch, which is, this is my business idea, and now give me some money. We said, what we are developing during that week is something that will have implications of what we are as human beings. And as a result, we want to do a performance that will allow the audience to experience it, and not just to sell it as a product. And so what happened as a result, I will let you hear in the background some beautiful singing. This voice is Rika Hanninen. She's a blind singer. She's a vocal coach. Beautiful singer and very professional. Very proud to be a blind singer. And she was the focal point of our labs in Helsinki. And this was the trailer for our performance there. Now, what was wonderful about working with someone as professional and as courageous as Rika was that we were able to ask her, what is your experience as a human being and what is your experience as a performer? And the first thing she said to us was, well, the problem is I never know how the audience feels. I can't see their reaction. So the first thing we did was something really simple. I mean, in terms of technology, really simple. We just wired the audience for pulse. So we asked for all these startups and investors at the premiere of the opening of Slush, who would like to participate and actually get wired for pulse, so to communicate your reaction, your heartbeat to the blind singer. And we had a rush for the we thought that nobody would care, and nobody was interested in this kind of stuff. And we had a rush for the stage. We had 2 more people than we could cater for. And the audience, of course, immediately became part of this experience. So their heartbeat was communicated to her. So this was really simple, but it made a massive difference because it established a communication between the audience and the blind singer. Next to Rika, is Jasmine Izdroke. She is Swedish and she is a cyborg. She has 3 RFID chip implants. One is over her heart. The one over her heart triggers X-ray of her heart, video of X-ray of her heart, so she's able to trigger that as part of the performance. But she also has 2 chip implants in her wrists. And the chip implants in her wrists are also very functional. Yasmin is someone who was born without the ability to sing or to scream or to raise her voice. She has a psychological impairment, and it is something that actually helps her in cases of emergency to trigger things from a device, from her wrists. Now, because she was admitted to hospital at a certain point and she was told off really badly for having something that's actually legally regulated and so totally above board, we decided that when we went to the European Commission that we would allow Yasmin to take the stage and do the first cyborg rights pitch to the Commission. And this was really very impressive because, of course, you don't normally get this type of speaker in front of all of these VIPs and politicians in that environment. So it was definitely noted. But then when it comes to this is Yasmin triggering sounds and communicating to Rika actually via vibration as well. So her movements were being communicated to Rika. But the one thing that really stunned everybody during these labs, the Mu Arts team set up the Neurofeedback Reader this time to allow you to control a musical instrument. So through focus, one could train their brain to go up and down the musical scale. And through further training, one could try and stop at a particular stage up and down the scale and therefore play music. Now, it was taking an average of 2 hours for people in the labs to train to do anything, because obviously it takes a while for the brain to adjust to this scenario. However, actually, if you think about it, 2 hours is nothing. If you think about when we operate machinery with muscle, we need to train the muscle for much, much longer to be able to move something. But if we actually train the brain is very plastic, as I said earlier, and the brain will actually adjust a lot more quickly. Now, this is already quite remarkable. But the thing that was really jaw-dropping is on the second day, the blind singer, Rika, put the Neurofeedback Reader on, and she was just able to play from the start. And so Chico over there just went, I've never seen this before. What is this? It's amazing. And what was really salient about this moment, that everybody in the room suddenly had their jaws drop because they realized that in the old mechanical world, when we were relying on moving big levers and we needed muscle power to move things, and some people were considered to be less able-bodied, in this new space of brain-computer interfaces and data-driven systems, someone like Rika is actually far more able-bodied and more talented than some of the rest of us. This is Rika's brain activity being mapped behind us. This is for the audience's benefit, so they could actually get the feedback from what was happening at this point with Rika's focus. And something else that's really important to us is that we tend to develop systems that support the community in the best possible way. So the community of creators, their intellectual property in the slush labs was being registered in the blockchain. So the sequence of development was logged and hashtagged, and we are doing this not only for the benefit of our creative community, but a lot of our community come from industry. And industry are very protective of their own IP, and when we introduce industry toolkits into our labs, these industry toolkits become very much part of the creative process, but very carefully tracked and traced and logged so that we can actually know which piece of IP belongs to whom, and it can be developed further. Not just because of that, but because of the whole system that we designed around the stuff that's developed, some of the people, and one of which is still, I mean, as I say, Chico keeps popping up on the screen, but this is the kinds of results that come out from the members of our community, and they are really diverse and varied, but these are just some of them on the screen, which are pretty quite remarkable. So MTF started back in 2012. I was directing at that time the Future of Music Tech for Europe with some fantastic people, some professors in the field from all over Europe, really wonderful project and wonderful brains, and I just decided that all of these brains needed to come into the same space, people from academia and industry and arts and science, and this is us at the Barbican in London with the Brainwave Quartet, with the London Symphony Orchestra, right from the beginning, all these people who came together basically stuck together and the community grew really, really fast. We were invited on tour. This is us in New Zealand, interacting with Polynesian Maori communities. These guys on the right who are here in traditional dress, they tend to be into hip-hop in a big way. They tend to be parts of hip-hop bands. We tend to hack into old instruments. We were hacking into some old instruments there, turning them into electronic instruments. They were just incredibly excited at the new creative possibilities that are being generated. Other parts of our community are crossover between ecosystems in science and biology in this case. For instance, this is Robertina Šebjanić. As a result of being involved with us, I happen to be on the jury of Ars Electronica. I actually proposed it for Ars Electronica. She ended up with 2 awards there. She creates these huge tanks full of marine life. In this case, it's jellyfish. Jellyfish communicate via chemical reaction. And these pieces of communication she turns into sound, and then she plays back to the ecosystem. So she creates a feedback loop of communication with some of these systems. She's I think she's still on residency with Ars Electronica now. And then the barriers, there are basically none. We had to apply for a special visa admission for Ahmad to join us in Berlin so that he could perform with Rani, who's from Israel. So Israel and Palestine on stage is nothing unheard of for us, and we insist on these kinds of collaborations and make sure that they are possible. In terms of artistic developments and movements, all kinds of cultural movements seem to emerge out of it. This is something we called gunk or geek punk. Prime time at the London Symphony Orchestra, we put on Lou Edmonds from Public Image Limited. For those of you who are old enough, you'll know that this is the band that was the successor of Sex Pistols. And a bunch of guys who hacked into Wiimotes, a punk duo hacking into Speak and Spell, a 3D printer on drums, and we thought this was going to be an awful cacophony, but what actually turned out was that the audience absolutely loved it, and we realized that the true spirit of the punk era, what we were reinstating was immediacy of expression. And this is really, really important in a day where the biggest art in the music industry seems to be coming from producers who smooth over the cracks and use, basically tools to change the original recording. So this is something that was being reacted to really well. Kids are absolutely awesome. And we run kids labs that run sort of half a day. But one of the most wonderful things is that they tend to end up on stage. So kids get into it so well. Look, that was Lubna over there. She's sitting over there. I didn't realize. So basically, these kids were just 3 hours developing these new kinds of sounds, studied from scratch, never coded before, never used electronics before. And because kids are just wonderful, they just use it like Lego bricks. And even more so, what's really important is that when you put them on stage and when they get the audience response, their level of confidence and achievement really rises. So the performance part is important not only for adults who actually need to establish this new form of communication with the audience and with others and test drive these new kind of inventions and innovations, but for kids too. We just regularly get this from parents saying, my kid was never into computing and now they want to become an engineer. How did you do that? So this same idea drove us to, I was on a job in Brazil with Brazilian government on behalf of the European Commission and European industry, so very unrelated to children at that point. But I was talking to the Minister of Innovation because they were really keen to develop the next generation of engineers in a country that is 10% illiterate. So if you think about 10% illiteracy in a country of 200 million people, you can make your do your maths and make your conclusions. It's actually really critical. And we feel that digital literacy is just as good as traditional literacy. In fact, both of them are a result of technological innovation. So we proposed one smartboard per child, and this is particularly in the Sao Paulo area where you have, for instance, 22 million people, and the whole of the periphery of Sao Paulo is full of children, as they define it, in vulnerability areas. This is one of our Swedish champions here, who's taken to DJing. I think he's about 3. But this is the kind of crowd that supports this platform, and we were very honored in 2014 when we were part of, we were doing Music Tech Fest as part of Microsoft Nerd Labs and in the middle of the MIT campus, that these people here, this was not initiated by us, it was initiated by them. They gathered these people together and created a manifesto for this field. And this manifesto was at first I was astounded that we were we were chosen as the prime example of bringing everybody together, people from different disciplines, and the statement was briefly that Music Tech Fest is not just important for music or technology, but for all areas of activity and all areas of research. So that actually gave me a challenge. I mean, if you look at the amount of organizations that have actually contributed to this platform, it's quite astounding. I mean, it is relentless work on our part, of course, for the past 6 years. But there's over 150 organizations that are from all kinds of backgrounds who have invested in this space, and they are growing. And when we did Stockholm, we wanted to make a statement because we are essentially a technology platform that is driven by creativity. And we wanted to make sure that we have 50% women, and we wanted to make sure that we put women in charge of all technology areas. So what was wonderful about it is that we ended up with people like, as fantastic as Imogen Heap at the helm of Blockchain Labs, and Swedish artist Robin in charge of girls in technology. People like Janisa Kragic, who's world-renowned AI expert, professor, and holding the biggest grant for AI research currently and for the next 10 years. Kelly Snook, NASA scientist. Anouk Wipprecht, I mentioned earlier, a fantastic fashion tech designer. Nancy Bain from Microsoft, who's a specialist on online communities and particularly fan-based communities. LJ Rich from BBC Click, and Ginger Lee's artist and curator from Florida. And these were just some of them. We had a whole bunch of women then join us. And for the labs, we went down into an old nuclear reactor. There's some people smiling who were there. For a whole week, we ended up with no fewer than 90 experts down in this nuclear reactor. Now, this was extraordinary because I started with 30. I usually say, well, let's do 30 people, choose 30 people to be part of a lab. But so many people got in touch with me, and so many people heard about it, and they really wanted to be part of it, that we ended up with 90. Now, these were extraordinary individuals, and if you're interested, you can talk to some of the people here in the room. Actually, quite a few people in the room were part of this. We have a picture here of 90 people down in the nuclear reactor, stuck in the nuclear reactor for a whole week. You might think that people will fall out with each other and have a really horrible time of it in a damp environment and cold. Actually, we all ended up with the same cold at the end, didn't we? We all ended up getting it from each other. But actually it started by wonderful opening speeches by some great characters, some of whom came in especially, such as Esa-Pekka Salonen's Director of Innovation there, who is Luke Ritchie, who is developing VR systems for orchestras. The artist who is artist in residence under Scott Polar Research, Kat Austin. These artists are very well known in Sweden as a choreographer and opera singer, but currently creating a robotic opera. So Carl-Johan Skarin and his wife, and great beatboxer. Basically, if I don't go through all of them, they're just Aaron Berg is director of the Opera of the Regions, currently on Upper Austria, and currently on opera for 6 cities. I mean, absolutely incredible people, and the results of the labs were phenomenal. Playing with cymatics, how sound effects matter through liquid graphene, for instance, or AI systems that are activated by dance. I'll talk you very briefly because you will hear more from people in this room who have created some of these objects. Now, this over here is in the room. Our 3D printed moon has arrived at ZKM, and that's Imogen Heap sending her voice to the moon. This was happening on the Friday of the labs. We had lots of specials during this week, lots of inspiration for the people in the lab, but this particular event was quite a milestone. We had an intimate gig, for instance, with Imogen Heap, but it was pretty much outshadowed by the moon. On a Friday of that week, the moon was in optimal position, so we could send sound to it and bounce it back. Not that moon, the real one. And people were allowed to use 2.3 seconds of sound and send it to the moon, and it was returned to them. Distorted, of course, by the noise of the universe and by the surface of the moon. So just some of the people who were involved in this. It started as a performance by Martin Nicole Regina, from whom you will hear, in fact, next. So I will pass it over to her in a second. But Martin Nicole actually passed the opportunity to do the solo performance with the moon to the wonderful collaborative space that the labs were. By that point, everybody was together in this space working. And 81 people from the labs ended up within 2.5 hours sending their sound to the moon and back. And this is part of what we're working here with today. So she will tell you more about it. It's absolutely wonderful. And actually, both this set and the previous set of photographs were taken by Andrea Cerrato, who's over there. And he's actually a wonderful programmer and artist in his own right, and great photographer, actually. And so you will see the diversity and the inclusion, which I don't think I need to mention because the photographs speak volumes. If you look at the person on the bottom left, this is Tim Palm. Tim was born, as he describes, with chicken arms, heavily deformed and unusable. And he has built himself what he calls a spaceship to be able to perform as a DJ, where he operates it with his nose and his tongue. And as soon as, of course, some people got together in the labs, we have some wonderful accessibility specialists in our teams, and they had a chat with Tim as to what would make it more interesting for him in terms of performance. And the result of this project ended in a track, which I will just let you hear a little bit of. Oh, very loud. Okay, so you got the feeling for it. But of course, a dance track, because he tends to work with. He tends to love making people dance, but also it was allowing him to play guitar, which is something that he always wanted to do. And it was a simple device as this one. It was developed by a couple of wonderful people, together with him in the lab. So Vahakan Matosian of Human Instruments and Tim Yates, who's part of Acoustic in London. And this project basically was 4 very strategically placed buttons that allowed Tim to use other parts of his, and in fact his supposedly unusable hands and arms, to activate loops and to create very complex compositions. And as a result, he was able to do a performance that made everybody dance at our festival. He did several performances in the labs. Super happy, and then 2 days after the festival, actually this was transmitted by BBC Worldwide to an audience of 19+ million people worldwide, so it was quite something for a person like that. And he is even happier now because it turned out that we are always very keen to involve all these projects in possibilities of getting funded to be developed further. And this project has won the 50,000 krona in Stockholm to be developed as part of KTH Innovation, one of the best technology transfer centers ever in Europe. So cymatics has always been part of it. This is how sound effects matter, and creates absolutely beautiful patterns. And we started lots of conversations in the past, and we had cymatics challenges and competitions, and people have come up with all kinds of wonderful results, which there's too many to mention here. One of them, which is salient, is the London, London-based, but now kind of worldwide-based beatboxer Reeps One, who joined us already in 2015 on a cymatics project as a kind of hobbyist, as someone who said, well, I've never been to university, so I don't really matter. And we said to him, oh, yes, you do. And just carry on researching and doing what you're doing from your artistic perspective. And he was, very pleased to say, recently, artist in residence at Nokia Bell Labs developed, together with another MTFer, as we call our crowd, an AI system for voice recognition, an AI system, actually a neural network system that learns voices and is able to learn how to be you as a performer, very convincingly so, assumes the persona of the performer. And there is a wonderful documentary which we premiered during our labs, which is released in the new year, about the Nokia Bell Labs residence and about this project. I'm also happy to say that he's currently an artist in residence at the World Economic Forum. But this is also just a very lo-fi video that was on a handheld, where he worked with Machina, a group of artists from Mexico who were with us, who work with Nike on various wonderful media projects, and they combine these AI systems to create wearables and stuff for him to be able to activate environments. So just one of the things that you were able to experience in the labs. And then we have a few people in the room who will recognize this. Also, lo-fi video of a simulator that's using NASA data sets that were brought in by Kelly Snook, NASA scientist. And for the first time, they mapped in a particular way the parameters of orbits of planets around the Earth and the relationship between the Earth and individual planets and the Sun. And of course, the kind of mandala resembling patterns started to reveal very particular moments. They were interested to test what happens at certain frequencies that are associated in traditional literature, particularly in Buddhist and Taoist literature, with chakras. So the frequencies in the human body that are considered by those, say, teachings to be salient. And everybody felt that something miraculous happened as a result of combining the scientific data with this hypothesis, where there are really distinct patterns that seem to happen that sort of resemble the phenomenon of the golden section, let's say. And this is something that opened everybody's eyes to the possibilities. Now, this is a team of 9. I think 7 of them are in the room. They're from all over the world, from Texas and New York to Bulgaria and Sweden and Greece and Croatia, and just an enormous amount of different backgrounds and knowledge that combined in this project. There was a culmination that happened as a result of a 24-hour hack, which was at the end of that week. Now, during these labs here, they'll be plugging this into combining this with some neurofeedback and combining it with other kinds of projects that people are doing with sound. And basically, at the end of, tomorrow, or by the end of our session tomorrow afternoon, we should see the next steps of these kinds of investigations. I will allow the people who are involved to actually tell you more about it, but whenever we kind of are asked, can we predict the future, we always say, well, we don't predict the future, we invent it. So on that note, I will pass the floor to, I believe, Martine Nicole. So please welcome Martine Nicole Regina.